Good morning, everybody. This is Simon Rust of AppSense. I apologise that we're a little delayed. It seems that there's a couple of sessions running a little delayed, so we just wanted to wait a few more moments to allow a few people to get in. In the meantime, I guess I can talk a little bit about myself. I'm the VP of Technologies at AppSense, which effectively means I've been looking after the product strategy of our user virtualization solutions. As you can tell from my accent, I'm a British guy. I moved to San Jose, where our technology center is, a little over 12 months ago with the family, small family, and I'm definitely enjoying the Silicon Valley life, that is for sure. How are we doing for time? Okay, so I guess it makes sense to crack straight on and get into the content. So today, I have the honor of talking about the personality cloud and what exactly that means and how that fits into the desktop projects, etc. that are going on. So let me jump straight into the content. And as a means of giving us a sort of an introduction, imagine a world where we never need to migrate a user ever again. That same world is where we manage 10,000 users with the same amount of energy and effort that it takes to manage one. That we can provide an environment that is completely independent of devices, but is cloud ready to enable users to just interact and do their daily jobs without needing to be concerned about where the infrastructure is sitting and where the data is coming from. However, that the data is secure and that the infrastructure is secure and all of those things are in place. But IT doesn't need to care what kind of device, end user device that you're using, whether it be a tablet PC, whether it be a smartphone, whether it be a laptop, be it a Wintel type, a Microsoft platform, or indeed an Apple platform device, etc., and of course the multitude of others. So just imagining that space. Now, the reality of today is not quite in that wondrous place. The reality of today is that today we have a very, very much an infrastructure-based computing model where the lion's share of our computing infrastructure sits within data centers within our own organization. Now, clearly, the place that we are potentially propelling ourselves towards is the sort of the IT as a service as we start to move some of that infrastructure away from our own organization, allowing ourselves to make better use of technology in the respect of having better ROIs, etc., etc. And perhaps some of the projects that are leading us into that space are things such as the Windows 7 migration. Clearly, virtualization will have some links into this stuff, and we see software as a service, platform as a service, even infrastructure as a service projects taking place today in the market space, and the majority of these things, of course, have some element of cloud in there, of course, and of course have to be extremely stringent in terms of the security to make sure that we're in a position that we have compliance and governance, etc., downstream. However, it does appear that many of these projects are either taking too long. We've decided as an enterprise we're just going to wait a little bit longer, because if we wait, somebody else will have taken the lead and we'll be able to learn from their challenges, the things that they found along the way. And some of those projects are simply stalled because the cost differential didn't appear to be there, and even down to sometimes we see failure. And I guess we've got to ask ourselves why. Why are we finding these challenges? And more commonly as we talk to customers, we're seeing that today's barrier isn't necessarily the technology. It isn't necessarily the projects themselves directly. It falls ultimately down to user complexity. So let me just explain a little bit more about what I mean about its user complexity. So the traditional desktop that we know and love today has got an operating system, it has applications, and of course it has the user. Now, in that hardware, all of those, the OS, the applications all sit, and they're all somewhat screwed together quite tightly. And the way I look at it is there are then strands of DNA, and those strands of DNA sit within the application set. So that might be, for example, how my Outlook is set for me. What's my signature? What does my custom dictionary contain? Where is that custom dictionary physically located on disk? These are all of the things that I sort of see as the DNA, if you will, and it's what makes my personal laptop or my personal desktop mine. It's what makes yours yours. Now, as we start to look at some of the technology that we have in terms of the application delivery that's in possibly organizations right now and today, Of course, we have locally installed applications and locally installed desktops. We're starting to see virtual desktops. Clearly, there are also virtual applications. So, using application virtualization tools such as the Microsoft App V technology, VMware's ThinApp, Citrix Streamed, Alteryx, Install Free, etc., etc. And of course, there's, dare I call it, traditional terminal services that sits somewhere in the background delivering either desktops or applications directly to other desktops. The point is, there's an element of heterogeneity taking place, specifically when we start to think about the various different accessing devices, desktop PCs, laptops, thin clients, tablet PCs, smartphones, PDAs. We can very quickly start to see how that complexity builds. Of course, you get all of these different application types delivered to the different devices in different ways, depending on the context of where you are at that given moment in time, whether you're on an aeroplane, whether you're in a train, automobile, or indeed an office or at home. The point is, the user complexity is gaining, and as more of these technologies arrive to help us make things simpler, it does appear in some instances making the complexity aspect of the user DNA being merged around multiple different platforms, multiple different places. So ultimately, there is a requirement for some form of, it's known today as user virtualization, which is simply where we can start to unlock the user layer. So pull out those strands of DNA, decouple them from the applications, decouple them from the operating system, decouple them from the desktop, manage them centrally in one location so that you've got one effective user store that contains all elements of the user in the enterprise, in your enterprise. And then finally, we're then able to deploy them or share them to any device, to any platform delivering to any application delivery technology quickly, easily, and efficiently. So I guess just to depict that, I suppose, in a more pictorial manner, consider here we've got 3-4 devices, Bob, Sarah, John, and Alex. I think that the sort of the vision here is simply that Bob, if I pick up on the left-hand side, a bit of Bob's DNA, the grey blob at the top, is in the applications. It's also in the operating system and on the device itself. And likewise for Sarah, John, and Alex, etc. The point is, these desktops are extremely expensive to manage because there's an element of inflexibility when it comes to how do I patch manage this thing, how do I upgrade it, how do I move the user from Windows XP to Windows 7 or from Office 2000 to Office 2010 or a mixture of all of those things in any easy steps. So stage number one is just decoupling. So how do we effectively vacuum up the elements of the user from each of the devices, the operating system and the applications, and store them centrally? What that enables us to have is it enables us to transition ourselves from having that sort of that monolithic blob that contains all things user, applications, operating system on a device, to have a more standardized approach such that we can have standard images of the operating system, standard images of the applications that we can deliver in real time. So I liken this, I guess, to Lego blocks. As a child, and perhaps as a slightly larger child as I am today, the function of playing with Lego is simple. You have your base building block, which I guess is your device. On top of the device, you can plug on an operating system. Of course, if you decide you want to change it, you can unplug it and plug a new one in. And on top of there, you can plug the applications. And ultimately, it means that we're then able to deliver the user personality or the user content onto that operating environment simply, easily, securely, and I guess most importantly, reliably. So this slide is just simply to give you a flavour of where I'm heading with this and what is meant by the user virtualization. So where's the relevance to cloud? Are you saying? Well, when we look at some of the facts and figures that are out there in hyperspace right now, one of those things is by 2015, any surface will easily become a display. To a certain degree, we're starting to see that already. But we think about, today, as you're in the electronics store picking your brand new 3D television, right in there, built into it, we're starting to see technology that allows us to access desktops and what have you. So immediately, it's a television, which is a surface which is ultimately becoming a display to allow me to access applications and allow me to access data. Interestingly, a few months ago, Dave Evans from from Cisco was talking about the amount of data that we all as human beings manage today and how that's going to change going forward. And, I think the numbers were that sort of 6 months ago, according to Dave, the average human was managing around 128 gigabytes of personal data. That's photographs. It might be videos, family videos. It might be documents, curriculum vitae, etc., resumes. But his projection was that in 2020, so 2020, that same individual will be managing more around the region of 120 or 130 terabytes. That's a fairly significant growth spurt. And when I think about, my own data usage at 128, it wasn't a long way short of where I was. So I can totally anticipate that this number may not be so vastly out of shape. And so what that means, of course, is that as we are, as we're going to the local Best Buy and picking up our brand new BlackBerry Playbook, for example, we're immediately thinking, well, how do I make sure that my data makes it onto there? How do I make sure my applications are in place and that I'm able to use the device quickly, efficiently, and easily without needing to spend too much time learning how that actual device operates? Because I'm probably less bothered about how the device operates and a lot more bothered about just doing stuff, being able to browse the web, being able to use my data, being able to send emails, etc., etc. And I guess the point there is that as time is progressing, environments are becoming more complex. And that's not necessarily by design. It's just by the virtue of the sheer volume of different data, different device types, laying on top of the fact that there's different application delivery models. So as I think about my, the playbook, how do I get my work applications on there? How do I get my personal applications on there? Is there a complexity challenge in there straight away? So the point here is the business desktop is without question morphing. And as we think that the personal device, so I've brought into context the playbook, and I might easily have mentioned an iPad or other type of device, an iPhone or perhaps an Android device such as a Motorola Zoom or something. Those devices are rapidly becoming a standard part of the enterprise. And as a consequence, the IT department are being pressed more and more and more for always-on access to data, applications, and work on devices that are not necessarily owned by the organization. So the point here, I guess, really is that it's very, very apparent that one size absolutely does not fit all. And to look at some of the comments that are out there today, you can snack on a smartphone, dine on the tablet, but be empowered by your laptop. The point there, I guess, is very simple, that, as I look at people that I meet day in, day out, typically those individuals will have between 2 and 4 devices that they use every single day for various different aspects of work and play with technology. So whether that's using a smartphone in the morning to read up on the RSS feeds and to just do a quick update on Facebook before getting into the office, or indeed using a tablet device while sat on the train to read the newspaper, or again to catch up on the latest news and RSS information, or whether it be, of course, using the laptop to create presentations or create work items, etc., as appropriate. I guess it's certainly sure that it's commonly accepted that we will all begin to use applications designed for specific devices. So the point being that if I use an iPad, then wouldn't I much rather and be much better suited to use the iPad email client than to use another, an Outlook client that's been delivered to me through some remote desktop that doesn't quite fit the screen correctly, and I need to keep, shrinking and magnifying the screen to then moving around the screen to be able to see the data. Of course, I'm going to prefer to use the local piece. So, as a consequence, we need to understand how do we synchronize content and data easily between those devices and eradicate or move or eradicate, I guess, the complexity for the end user for items such as, for example, I perhaps use Outlook on my laptop device, and perhaps I use an iPad when I'm out of the office, just for simplicity and lighter weight, etc. I only really want one signature, one email signature. I don't want to have to create it 2 and 3 times. And if I get to a point where, I don't know, I'm unfortunate enough to have my iPad stolen, then I'd like to be able to go to a store, pick up another one relatively cheaply, hopefully, and quickly be able to just power it up and then use it and have things that I take for granted, such as my email settings and the signature to automatically be in place, ready to roll within a few moments of switching the device on. Those are the kind of things that is where that business device is morphing, and it's the kind of things where expectations are starting to raise in terms of exactly how we will start to use these devices and exactly what we will tolerate in terms of the availability of service on these devices. So when I start to look at the personality cloud, I guess when I'm talking about a smartphone, an iPad or a playbook, I'm immediately talking about a device that does not necessarily have access to the corporate VPN, or perhaps more importantly, is not necessarily always going to be inside the four walls of an enterprise office. So consequently, I need to be in a position where I can deliver all of the content I've talked about, so whether it's the data files themselves, the presentations, the Word documents, or the simplicity, I guess, of the signature within the mail tool on the iPad. I need to make those things available when the user is online, but not necessarily in the office. So consequently, the view and the vision here is just to have a user virtualization service that sits in the cloud. Of course it's secure, of course it's compliant and governed, etc. The point is, all of the storage is easily accessible. As a user, I am typically, unfortunately, in a position where the mobile device does have some form of internet connectivity, whether it's just a 3G connection or indeed a more useful Wi-Fi connection, perhaps. But the point is, I very rarely today find myself in a situation where I'm completely out of luck when it comes to the connectivity. And what that effectively also grants me, or what it should also grant me, is a unified personality across any device. So where my example with Bob and Sue and those folks a slide or two ago was referring to removing the strands of DNA of Bob from Bob's Windows PC, there are aspects, as I mentioned there, that are totally relevant and pertinent to be delivered into other device types. So those things might be time zones, they might be languages, they might be the signature files in an email client that I've just referred to. It might be the actual settings of how to find the mail server in a mail client. There may be dictionary files from within certain word processing or office automation tool sets. And a multitude of other things, such as, browser help, browser history, browser favorites, all of those things that could quite easily and should quite easily be merged across all of the different devices that you use on a day-to-day basis. And the basis here is quite simply to be able to deliver you as a user from the cloud rapidly, easily, and also be able to do things such as health checks of the user details on those devices. So be able to determine has the content made it successfully, has the end user had any form of challenges, etc., such that we can start to perform a little bit of asset management type techniques to those devices to be able to know exactly what data went where and when. And of course, to be able to apply security such that certain data types are simply not allowed to make it to the endpoint devices, but are allowed to make it to other endpoint devices, or that certain data types can only make it to a certain endpoint device when the physical location of said endpoint device is suitable. So I guess the point there is that it might be that the decision is that certain financial information about an organization is only available to you as a user when you are physically inside the four walls of the organization, etc. And of course, all of this has to be simple for the user. The user doesn't need any extra unnecessary complications with reference to setting this up and working. It should just automatically, like a click of the finger, just play and work and give user immediate synonymous access to all of their data with little more than a username and a password and obviously some form of subscription. So what does that, where do we get to? Well, ultimately, the results that we should expect to see from that are we should expect to see that we find that the users themselves feel empowered, and the IT part of the business feels that they have flexibility and control. And the point there really being that from the user's perspective, as I look back through my career, sort of 15 or 18 years ago when I first started out and I was working with very early terminal services implementations, it was really, really clear back then that the way you deliver a desktop is you deliver a standard desktop and the user cannot deviate from it. There is no ability to personalize. There's no ability to put photographs of siblings or of family in the background or of the vacation types, etc. There was no way that the user was going to do anything other than what was delivered to them. And guess what? That's what they got, and they liked it. Whether they did or they didn't was somewhat immaterial. That's given. Today, life is not quite so straightforward from the respect of delivering a deliverable, if that's the right terminology. Today, we have to be far more aware of the needs of the user. And I think, as my sort of typical example I throw here is that in our household, we have a couple of tablet devices, the same brand, unfortunately configured slightly differently because there is this personalization challenge. And my two children are 4 years old and 2 years old. And both of the children are fully able to make use of the tablet device and can drive it and access information with it as well as I can, as well as anybody I know can. However, the one challenge that comes up is when my 2-year-old son finds that he's picked up a tablet device that does not have the Thomas the Tank Engine game on it. That tablet device very quickly finds itself stuck in the side of a wall or a cabinet or something as he's had his little tantrum and thrown it. Now, what that's kind of telling me is that's interesting. There's a point of user acceptance in the not too distant future. I guess perhaps 10 or 12 years away, 14 maybe. But the point I guess I'm trying to make here is that the user doesn't just accept it and live with it. They start to feel disappointed and start to feel like the technology isn't helping them do what they need to do. In this case, it's play with Thomas the Tank Engine, which I guess isn't really a business use, but I think as a point of view, I think it's very interesting and it's an important example. And all the way through this, of course, the IT organization absolutely must feel like they are in complete control of the service that's being delivered to the end user themselves. And by removing the user complexity from the device, they're able to do so. So as we walk through towards the summary, I guess I've rushed through this a little quicker than I perhaps had hoped. The consumerization of IT, whether it's the tablets, the smartphones, the user-introduced laptops, etc., it has clearly a huge effect on asset management and application and data and content delivery to the organization, or to the user rather. However, user-centric computing is absolutely critical for our control, and user virtualization does supply us with a means of a solution via a personality cloud. Clearly, by moving the infrastructure out of the data center and out to cloud, it means that we're in a situation where we can start to lower our costs once we start to roll technology and roll users into this new form of work delivery. And ultimately, it's about delivering a better quality of user experience out, which lends us straight into happy end users. Clearly, all of this needs control, it needs governance and the compliance pieces. But from the perspective of keeping that end user happy, it just means that they will ultimately work a little bit harder, I would hope. But it just means that the challenges associated with just the typical drum of working through users and working through their issues with a laptop device that maybe they weren't massively happy with, or the tablet that they wanted to use but they've not been allowed to because they're not, as a corporate, you can't have this. All of those little challenges disappear, which ultimately leads us into a situation where we can enable flexibility and control for the CIO, who can start to focus in on how do we ensure that the right applications are making their way to that end user, rather than worrying about what are the devices that we need to support and how do we make sure the application functions on those devices, and how do we make sure that the persona of the user makes its way through to that device and therefore is a happy guy as well. So that was kind of the presentation I wanted to run through. Like I say, I appreciate I've gone through it rather quickly. So at this stage, I guess I hand to see if there are any questions coming out that perhaps I can help with. Stunned silence, it would seem. I'll hang around for another 10 or 15 minutes just in case there are any questions that come up. But thank you very much for your time today, everybody. Really appreciate it. Thanks very much.